Hi everyone, my name is Paul Tilley and welcome to Unit 1 of e-Business. In this unit, we're going to look at all of the things related to the background of where we've come from in order to have a world in which we can buy things through our computer. E-commerce and e-business allow for the interaction of buyers and sellers through an electronic medium over the internet. And in this particular unit, we're going to look at a whole bunch of things related to that. Specifically, we're going to explain why it's important to study e-commerce from a business perspective. We're going to define what e-commerce is. We're going to explain how e-commerce differs from the concept of e-business. It's a matter of scale and scope. And identify the primary technology building blocks underlying e-commerce, and recognize the major current themes in e-commerce. We're going to identify and describe the unique features of e-commerce technology and discuss their business significance. We're going to describe the major types of e-commerce. We're going to explain the evolution of e-commerce. We're going to describe the major themes underlying the study of e-commerce. We're going to identify the key components of e-commerce business models, which is an important concept. And we're going to describe the basic business models that exist today. And we're going to explain key business concepts and strategies applicable to e-commerce. You will find the information related to this in chapters 1 and 2 of e-commerce, business, technology, and society. You will also find it found in Unit 1 of this learning module for MR2350 e-business. First, let's take a look at the history of e-commerce. And in 1994, e-commerce, as we know it, did not exist. So this is a relatively new technology. The early years of e-commerce really began outside of the consumer spectrum, okay? So the basic technology to allow this sort of thing has evolved in industry. For example, banks could do electronic funds transfer long before we ever could. But we're talking about it from a consumer perspective and how it's come into the public consciousness. 1994 was really a magical year for the start of that. The early years of e-commerce during the late 1990s was really a period of business vision, inspiration, and experimentation, with a focus on experimentation. When this concept of e-commerce came about, people thought it was going to be wonderful, and a lot of people put a lot of money into various schemes that many of that just did not work. And really, it all was a lot of hype right up to 2000. The turn of the century, we had the Y2K situation, a lot of fear and concern about our reliance on computers, and it really kind of sent a bit of a shock into the e-commerce world. The stock market crash further squashed it. This whole concept was really kind of voodoo until at that point in time. It just did not really live up to the aspirations of what people thought it would do. However, like a phoenix rising from the fire, between 2002 and 2007, retail e-commerce started to grow again. And again, this time, kind of like a reboot, it put better processes and better business models into place. So it really started to grow at about 25% a year. Actually, it was, 25% of a little amount now is not a lot. So, we're talking, it really started slow, but it picked up pace really quick. 2007 was a magic year because in that year, Apple introduced the iPhone. And realistically, the iPhone single-handedly changed the way people thought about e-commerce. Because the idea of putting apps on a phone and allowing people to surf the web and be able to buy things certainly changed the concept of what a handheld cell phone did. And Apple really drove this push towards e-commerce, particularly from the handheld device perspective. Mobile and social media, the advent of Facebook, for example, was only 2004, and mobile technology really piqued a gem in people's eyes to say, hey, this potential is huge. We can shop from our cell phones. We can do so many things from our cell phones. We can connect with our friends from our cell phones. It made these cell phones, come smartphones, come mobile devices, including iPads and things, really allowed for e-commerce to take off. In 2018, less than 25 years later, around 190 million Americans and roughly about 30 million Canadians were expected to spend almost $1 trillion online. That was 2018. We have since seen the pandemic. And the pandemic has driven e-commerce wild because people just don't want to go out and shop anymore. There's all kinds of worries about going out in public. So really, the e-commerce firms who have operated during the pandemic have seen massive growth, massive use of new technology, and massive adoption by organizations and people who refused to adopt it before, because now they're forced to adopt it. So e-commerce in 2022, the year that I'm recording this, is really hot. And it really has some solid business background. In other words, it's actually making money for the companies who operate it. So e-commerce technology continues to evolve at really exponential rates. This is increasing hand over fist. And really, because of this, it has provided so many opportunities for entrepreneurs to create new business models, new ways of making money out of it. And what we're finding is businesses in traditional industries have either gone one direction or another. They've adopted this or they haven't. And what we're going to see is a lot of businesses that haven't are finding themselves what we call disrupted. In other words, their market is disappearing on them. And that could potentially lead to some of these industries no longer existing in the future. They have not adapted, and as a result, they may end up dying. So this is a real challenge for particularly rural businesses and businesses in small towns. They need to think about, how can we get onto this to be able to take advantage of this opportunity that has been presented to us without getting steamrolled over by companies like Amazon. For you, as a student, there's a huge number of opportunities out there in e-commerce, and this has provided a great opportunity for growth, for employment. And if we have a good understanding, and if you have a good understanding in your business program here of what e-commerce is, what it does, how it operates, and the potential of it, that will certainly increase opportunities for you into the future. So what exactly is e-commerce? Well, e-commerce really involves the use of the internet, and specifically the World Wide Web within the internet, and the use of mobile applications, particularly this smartphone technology, in browsers that run on tablets or cell phones or these sorts of things, mobile devices. And oftentimes, too, it's turning into mobile devices that we don't even have to interact with. For example, our smart speakers or our smart thermostats, these sorts of things. Pretty soon it will be our smart fridges. These are going to be able to interact or allow us to interact with businesses. More formally, e-commerce can be defined as digitally enabled commercial transactions between and amongst organizations and individuals. A lot of people use the terms e-commerce and e-business interchangeably. There is a distinction between the two. E-commerce really encompasses the electronic-based organizational activities that support a firm's market exchanges. In other words, the technical connection of your cell phone to Amazon to be able to buy that pair of gloves. Okay, that's e-commerce. E-business, though, is much broader. It encompasses the entire world of internal and external electronically based activities, including e-commerce. So e-business refers primarily to the digitally enabling of transactions and processes within the firm involving information systems under control of the firm. E-business does not include commercial transactions involving the exchange of value across organizational boundaries. So now that we know what e-commerce is, let's look at some of the unique features of e-commerce in terms of the actual technology. And we've identified really 8 unique features of e-commerce technology that both challenge traditional businesses in the sense that it can disrupt them, and it can help explain why businesses are so keen to engage in e-commerce. First of all, we've got this thing called Ubiquity, and effectively it just means that it's available everywhere. So in traditional commerce, the marketplace is a physical place. So you physically got to walk into the store to visit it, to do the transaction. So you go, you buy your lollipops, you bring them to the counter, you pay for your lollipops, you walk out of the store. E-commerce, in contrast, is characterized by the fact that you don't have to go in anywhere. You just use your cell phone, buy it. Simple as that. So effectively, you can buy it in the middle of the woods or wherever you got internet access. You can go out and get access to it. That's what we mean by ubiquity. Another key feature that's very important in a global world is it is really of a global reach. Borders don't mean anything on the internet. You have no idea what country you're going to when you go to a website or a service provider online. So e-commerce technology permits commercial transactions to cross-cultural, cross-regional, cross-national boundaries far more conveniently and far more cost-effectively than ever was the case. So as a result, the potential market size for e-commerce merchants is really the world. There is no limit to the world. So the internet makes it much easier for small companies, big companies to compete on a level playing field there, because the fact is that your audience is the world. Now that comes with some pluses and minuses. You know, if we think about the world, that means that every other company is competing with you. And that is probably the biggest challenge that a lot of small firms run across when they think, well, you know, my market is everywhere. But again, every other company's market is everywhere, including your market too. If you've ever gone to Europe or if you've ever gone somewhere else in the world, you notice that the electrical plugs are different. This is because there's no global standard for those types of things. Some countries have similar plugins, other countries have different plugins, and this creates some problems for you when you try to get your razor work. Well, if you think about the technology of the internet, though, it is based on a global standard. So, and that's very unusual, but something that allows it to be used everywhere, and it adds to this concept of ubiquity. E-commerce technologies, the technical standard of the internet, is the standard around the world. And because of that, no matter what country you're in, everybody will use that same standard. Another key feature of e-commerce technology is the fact that it has all of the information of the world available to it. So it has very rich potential, and this is particularly true in today's world where we have video, audio, and it's moving even beyond simple video and audio to three-dimensional or some form of what we used to see on the old versions of Star Trek, where you could put on these glasses and see what you're thinking about. So it's a hologram of sorts, a virtual world, a virtual environment, and you can see so much more detail without actually being there. You know, and again, the pandemic has shown us Zoom technology has grown so much. You know, to be able to do audio conferencing, video conferencing. We're seeing more and more of this and more technology to allow people to act face to face at a distance. Another key feature of e-commerce technology is the fact that it's interactive, and particularly modern programs. You know, Facebook, for example, is an example of that interactivity. You can send a message, someone can respond back to you. You can do conferencing and all these sorts of things for a shared experience. It's an interactive environment. So aside from the telephone, you know, this technology has really brought us into an improvement in two-way communication between the seller and the buyer to allow for a more richer experience and a more richer environment. You'll hear the term information density beat around a lot with regards to e-commerce technology. And information density really means that you have the capacity for a lot of information to be delivered very easily. And this would include audio, video, and other sensory type things. So we can collect huge amounts of data, store, process, communicate. The cost of doing all that has dropped significantly. So you can bring a lot of information, a lot of richness to the communications process, again, which enables a better experience for buyer and seller. Further, the e-commerce technology allows for a great deal of personalization and customization. Just think about your cell phone, for example. If you think about all the apps you can put on your cell phone, your apps are different than my apps. In other words, you can customize your cell phone to do the things that you want it to do. Well, that's a good analogy for e-commerce as a whole, because e-commerce technology allow for you to personalize what you want. So for example, if you buy a product, you can buy it in the size you want, exactly the size you want. You want to buy a pair of jeans, for example, you put in your measurements and it will cut the jeans exactly the way you want them. Or that computer, the exact as you want. Or the car, exact as you want. So it enables what we call mass customization. Companies can customize a product to a customer of one, while at the same time significantly achieve the benefits of mass production. The final unique feature of e-commerce technology is the idea of sociability. E-commerce has allowed for a much broader ability to have two-way communications. Okay? And these technologies really then have become more social. The sharing of content into a worldwide community between users, back and forth, ease of this activity has made it a social platform. People enjoy being there. There's as much of a social element as a business element to it. So this graphic gives a quick summary of those 8 unique features of the e-commerce technology: ubiquity, global reach, universal standards, social technology, personalization, information density, interactivity, and richness. The next thing we really need to discuss is the basic types of e-commerce that's out there. And there are a variety of types that we should be familiar with. The first one that we normally think about is business to consumer. It's shortened up by calling it B2C e-commerce, business to consumer. And it's probably the most commonly discussed one, and it effectively means a product is sold by a business to a consumer. So, things like retail goods, travel, financial, real estate, other types of services that you as a consumer would buy would be considered B2C e-commerce. But that's not the only one. There are many others. The next most common one that we think about is business to business e-commerce. And this is where really a business works with another business. This is like retailer to a wholesaler. So business to business e-commerce has been around a long time. And it focuses on one business buying something from another business. And it really is the biggest form of e-commerce out there today, because businesses sell and buy huge amounts of products. There's really 2 basic business models within the B2B arena. First, there's net marketplaces. These are open marketplaces where companies can get together and, make deals to buy things from one another. So e-distributors, e-procurement, that sort of thing. We also have private industrial networks. And these would be just private networks that are not open to every business, but just within the group of companies that deal with one another. So it's a kind of a private club of businesses that buy from one another. Another type of e-commerce that we normally don't think about is consumer to consumer, C to C. And consumer to consumer, it's really one consumer meets up with another consumer to exchange something that one another wants, so money and a product. Now, you can think about Newfoundland Classifieds. This is where you can go on to a forum, you can see what people have for sale, meet up with them, buy it, and get it. So there's that exchangeability. So it's like a catalog of items that is all aggregated together with searchability, and that allows for transactions to occur. Another type of e-commerce that's grown significantly over the last little while is mobile e-commerce. M-commerce, it's often called. It refers to the use of mobile devices to enable online transactions. It's buying stuff off your smartphone. So it allows this through a wireless connection, a connection to your bank, so a payment method such as PayPal. And once connected, mobile consumers can purchase products and services from anywhere and make travel reservations, use an expanded variety of financial services such as online banking. And this has grown significantly in the last number of years. Yet another type of e-commerce is something called social e-commerce. And this is something you'll notice more once you're familiar with it. Okay? If you're involved in Instagram and Facebook to some extent now as well, But if you scroll through certain Instagram feeds, you will notice that, like in the image here, the image will come up with an indicator, I'll call it. A little bubble comes up that says things like what kept $15 or these sorts of things. Effectively, there are influencers out there that post pictures on social media that are really advertising for companies. So, for example, this particular young girl advertising for some company, you can scroll over the item she's wearing, for example, the sweater, the shirt, the pants, whatever, and you will enable yourself to click to the item. So it's sociable, but it's also a very commercially marketing type traditional environment. Local e-commerce is something that's come about in the last number of years that really local companies should take. Local e-commerce is something that's relatively new and not widely adopted by many local firms, particularly in rural areas or places like Newfoundland. And there is a huge opportunity there that local firms need to become aware of, number one, and take advantage of, number two. So local e-commerce is a form of e-commerce that focuses on engaging the consumer based on his or her current geographic location. Your cell phone has a GPS in it that basically knows exactly where you are at any given point in time. And local merchants can use a variety of online marketing techniques to drive customers to their stores based on where those phones are located. So as your phone goes by a store, for example, the store will send you a message or show up on Google Maps or these sorts of things, allowing for an interaction based on where you're located relative to the store. This technology is relatively in its infancy. There's all kinds of wonderful things that could be done with geo-based marketing, and it is something we will see a lot more of in the future. If you want to see a summary, Table 1.3 in your textbook gives an overview of the various e-commerce types, followed by another graphic that talks about the evolution of e-commerce and shows you a time scale there. Next, we introduce a very important concept, the concept of the business model. And a business model is really a set of planned activities, sometimes referred to as a business process, that's ultimately designed to generate a profit for the business. In summary, is how the business makes money. Next, let's take a look at the key components of the business model, and we've identified 8 key components here. First of all, there's the company's value proposition, and ultimately, a company's value proposition explains what a company does in order to fulfill customers' needs and make money doing it. Second, in terms of the business model of firms, has to tell how it's going to generate its revenue. Okay, it has to say that, and it has to say it in such a way that it makes enough money to make this particular option the best option relative to all the others. So the revenue model is how the company is going to generate money to make profits. There's lots of examples of revenue models out there. For example, advertising. Companies sell advertising, so people pay money to companies to advertise on their websites. There's a subscription model where people pay to gain access to the site. There's the transaction fee model, so as you buy things, a certain percentage goes to generate profit for the company. So eBay, for example, makes money on every transaction. There's the sales model, which is really, I sell you something, I make money on it. It's a traditional, what we consider the traditional sales model. And then there's the affiliate model, which is like bonus points, like Ear Miles is kind of an affiliate model. So you get some benefit based on your usage again. It's really a referral type based system. The business model must identify too the market opportunity and what is the actual potential here. So we're trying to figure out, okay, what is the marketplace that the company is going to operate in? How big is it? What are financial opportunities for there? We also need to look at the competitive environment. What's going on outside? Are there competitive firms out there? Who are those competitive firms? How does this firm stack up against the competition? What does it do better? How is it going to be able to attract customers relative to all the others? And speaking of relative to all the others, we have to enable ourselves to consider what is the company's competitive advantage. The business model has to clearly lay out. This is what we do better than anyone else, and this is why someone's going to buy from us. So firms achieve a competitive advantage when they can produce a better quality product and bring it to the market faster and cheaper than anyone else. So firms tend to successful firms have some competitive advantage over other firms, and you need to identify what that is. We also have to include a company's market strategy. What is the plan to put the product in the consumer's hands? How are we actually going to do that sort of thing? Next, we need to look at the company's organizational development. It's rare for one person to be able to grow a business. So who are the key people? How are they going to enact? What is the plan for growth? How are we going to get enough people and enough skills to be able to make this move forward? And tied with that is the company's management team. This is probably one of the most important elements. You had to have good leadership in order to bring the company to where it needs to go. So it needs to identify where it wants to go into strategy, and the company's management team is going to be how it's going to achieve that. So in terms of business strategies, moving these things forward, so you have your business model, the business strategy is going to say, okay, look, we need to be able to set ourselves apart from someone. We need to either differentiate ourselves, make ourselves different. We have to be better in terms of our cost structure. We have to be bigger in terms of our scope or our size, local, regional, national, whatever. We have to think about what is our focus. Do we have a particular market niche, an area that we can sell in? And are we tight with the consumers? Do we have what's called customer intimacy? Do we have strong ties? Do people come back and buy from us again and again and again? Finally, in this particular unit, we're looking at a terminology that has only emerged in the last number of years called disruptive technology. Now, effectively, what a disruptive technology, it is a new technology that's brought into the marketplace that changes the way that people think about how things should be done. Okay, and normally businesses in traditional technologies, when a new technology is brought in, for example, we used to mine coal to heat our homes, and then someone came up with oil. That was a disruptive technology because coal was no longer used after oil. Or horses were disrupted by cars, these sorts of things. Now, digital technology is a huge disruptor for so many, and normally when we call, and most technology coming today is digital technology that causes this disruption. We call it digital disruption. This means that traditional business models are being thrown aside because new ones have come into play. We've seen lots and lots of companies over the last number of years that are very much digitally based come in. Amazon, Tesla, and the concept of bitcoins has really changed the way that we look at a lot of traditional industries, be it shopping online, automobiles, or money. And these are going to be something that we're going to see a lot more of into the future. So that's the material covered in Unit 1. I want you to take an opportunity to read the chapter, take a look at the materials, do some of the exercises, and give it some consideration. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm Paul Tilley. Thanks for joining me. Bye.